Hello and welcome to What Would Jesus Tech? My name is Andrew Noble. I am so glad to be joined today by Bruce Taylor. This is a background and a story that I think you will want to hear because it's like marrying capitalism with environmental stewardship, which is possible apparently, like making money while saving the planet. And just where Bruce's heart is because of, how I know him. I've got to know him. We used to be in a small group together. So I don't know if you listeners right now, you're listening to this, you're going to small group maybe right now. We were there. He and his family joined, and his whole family would come up, and it was awesome. But he joins us today. For those of you who are new to the podcast, What Would Jesus Tech? We are a podcast made for creators by creators. Each of the three hosts, though Joel isn't here today, we're in the process of making and producing digital and physical things for the sake of God's kingdom. And we hope to inspire and help you do that or use tech in your daily life. So with Bruce, just a bit of a bio. He is the founder and president of Enviro-Stewards. So he founded that company way back 24 years ago. He already had some experience leading up to that. He has won the highest awards in pollution prevention field in both Canada and the United States. He was recently selected as the top environmental consultant in Canada by Clean 50. Their work has won lots of awards and things like that, and we'll get into some of those stories today. Thanks, Bruce, so much for joining.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here. This is wonderful.
And so maybe I thought we'd start, instead of like how amazing you are, can you tell us about a failure that happened? Like we're going to get into your story and why but I was reading up and I'm like, Bruce, I know you, like you're okay with making mistakes. Sometimes mistakes happen. Can you tell us a story of, something that you were trying to help a company become more sustainable? You're in consulting, you're trying to make money too, but it just didn't go well. What's a story of failure that you want to share?
Well, let me think about that. But I would say that probably our work in South Sudan is a good avenue for that. So basically we fail forward there. So started working there in 2004 in South Sudan, Southern Sudan at that time, and doing initially helping build an orphanage, but doing a water project. And so what you do is you try things that I tried to introduce an efficient cook stove that they weren't ready to go for at that point. And so we do water. And so we tried kind of a traditional charitable approach on the projects, but that doesn't work well. And so we converted to a development-based model where we train and equip people. And so I guess my failures get kind of hidden because they're in the stream of, leading to where you want to go, and you don't really recognize them as failures as such. You just kind of move on. I don't know if that helps. No,
that makes sense. And so you've been involved in South Sudan. I think you told me the story once of how you got into Enviro-Stewards and the reason why you started the company. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. Yeah. So I worked for other consulting companies. Well, back in high school, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. So I was good at kind of math and science kind of stuff and good at camp counselor kind of stuff. And so what am I going to do? So eventually I decided, well, if I go into engineering and I don't like it, I can go into other things. But if I go into something else, then I have to restart if I go into engineering. So I decided chemical engineering. And then I tried the co-op jobs to try different things, mine, petroleum, pulp and paper and whatnot. And I found that consulting was a good fit with my personality. So my personality, I'm challenged by new things. The first time I do something is probably the best I'm going to do it. Other people on my team, every time you do it, it gets better and better. But for me, kind of the challenge of the new. And so with the consulting, you're always working on a dozen different things and they keep rolling over. So then after I graduated, I worked for other consultants for about a decade. And I guess two things happened. So about a year after I graduated is when I became a Christian. And so I spent about 2 years, I call it a pre-life crisis. So why are we on the planet? What's life about? Whatnot, right? And so I had built a treatment plant for Kraft Foods in Ingleside. So it was the largest cheese plant in Canada. And this treatment plant went from my mind to the drawings to starting it up. And this is great. But you know what? In 30 years, it's going to be gone. But anybody I worked with is going to be around forever. So any impact I had on a person lasts forever. And so I felt like kind of, should I quit and go into ministry or something? But then I felt, nope, any job that interacts with people is a good job, right? And so I keep doing the same thing, but for a different reason. And so then I stayed and I was working for other people, and I was taking leaves of absence to do volunteer projects. Helped out at a community called His Mansion down in New Hampshire, where people went to get off of drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. It was a really good program, very high success rate because they stayed for a whole year, right? But it became a challenge with a conventional employer to take these leaves of absence. And then the other challenge is the type of work that's best for the environment isn't best for the consultant. So as a consultant, you make much more money treating symptoms of problems than preventing the problems. If you prevent the problem, you make much less money. And so most consulting companies aren't set up to do that because it's not, A, they might not have the capacity, but B, it's not even good for them if they did. So I had to leave and start Enviro-Stewards for those two reasons. So A, can I provide a work environment where people, it's nice, go home at 5 o'clock, work on, so when I looked at why people leave jobs, right? Either their work is trivial or they have a personality problem with somebody. So let's just work on those two. So we just use Matthew. If you got a problem with somebody, go try and work it out. If you can't do it, bring in, right? But then on the work side, part of the reason we win so many awards is because of the stuff we don't do. So we don't do air permits. Now we'll do an air permit here and there, because we need it for some other, special reason. But there's 1,000 other consultants who can get you a permit to discharge what you're doing now, right? So that allows us more time to focus on impactful projects. And when you do that, then it's better for your staff also, but also you have more impact and whatnot. Our turnover is 10 times lower than a normal consulting company because of that and some other reason, even though we struggle to pay average even, right? And so people don't really realize the power of purpose in that context, right? Is people have an inherent desire. Even customers. 2 of my customers have come to South Sudan with me, like Tim Hortons Canada, PepsiCo Foods Canada, right? Here, you'd be lucky to get 5 minutes in their office, right? And they're going to spend 2 weeks with you in a war zone, right? And you actually came to South Sudan one time, right, Andrew?
No, I did not.
Oh, you went. Sorry, you were on that trip.
I was. Yeah. I felt like I was on the trip because I was part of the church plant.
Exactly.
So many people who were on that trip went on that. But
exactly.
No, I was not part of that trip.
Exactly. Yeah. And so anyway, in 2000, I left and started my own company for that purpose to create a nice environment. So it was just me working to start, and we add about 1 person a year so that we've never actually had to lay anybody off over 24 years. We've had struggles, right, in 2008 and COVID and stuff like that. But we grow at a slow rate so we can do that kind of thing. And then we focus on this type of work, and it's kind of our niche. And then we have kind of a hybrid model where our paying work is the type of work, which we'll probably get into, of helping manufacturers, primarily in North America, to reduce their water, energy, electricity, their waste costs and whatnot. And then we reinvest part of that savings in this development work where we provide these price discounts for people to buy these locally produced water purifiers in South Sudan, Africa.
Yeah, it's a holistic model, which makes it different than typical consulting, typical business in general. And so clearly your Christianity and your like you mentioned it in that story, like you were saved and you wanted purpose. And so now you're trying to live that out. Can you connect some of those dots, like even the name Enviro-Stewards? Mm-hmm. Why, as a Christian, is it important to even care for the environment? I think we all kind of have some idea of that generally, but I worry that sometimes that's more built around a cultural, we should care about the environment than biblical. Mm-hmm. So where do you derive the purpose for the environment?
Yeah, no, that's great. So I came up with that name in 2000 when I started the company, and I was a little bit sad later on when it became a buzzword, because then your name can go out of fashion if it came into fashion kind of thing. It's still sticking around a little bit. But I do it because a steward is somebody who looks after stuff for you, right? So in the Old Testament, they look after your farm, and they don't run it the way they would. They run it the way you would, right? And then steward of the environment, basically the first job man had was actually looking after the environment before the fall of man. Right. And that job's never gone away. And I speak at a lot of environmental conferences, and sadly, a lot of Christians aren't at the forefront of that, even though they should be. Like, that's our job one. It's not our job one, but it's a very important job. It's the first job we were given. And so people are absent from that conversation, which is sad. And it's not that we worship the environment or anything. It's not. It's a created thing. And yes, we're not here forever, right? At some point in time, we'll be gone. But that's no reason to trash your apartment because you might move out someday, right? It's a lack of respect for whoever created that apartment you're living in, right? And so we're a little bit off. Not everybody, but a lot of Christians are off on kind of the role of environment and our role in it kind of thing. And because of that, it hurts our witness.
Bruce, do you think that some of that has to do with Christian beliefs about eschatology and the end times? I know one thing that I hear in my context is the thought that, well, we're looking forward to the new heavens and to the new earth. So it doesn't matter if we do a good job of saving our planet, or if our planet, goes into a trash world type situation. It's going to be remade new anyway. So why should we care? Do you see that at work in talking with Christians about this subject?
I think that's definitely there. And I agree. We might even be in the end times now. Like, it could be today during our blog, right? Or it could be 100 years or 1,000 years. We don't really know, right? But it could be, like, the conditions are set. But if, let's say you rented a room in your house to somebody, and that person said, yeah, well, I intend to buy a house one day, right? Would that be a good reason for them to trash your room? Right? I'm not saying they need to worship your room or do anything else, but it's just a lack of respect for you. So if we trash our planet here, it's a lack of respect for the creator who created it, right? And I guess that would be my take on that.
Well, that's good. That's good, because that then dovetails with conversations about stewardship, because stewardship and ownership are two different categories, scripturally speaking. As far as ownership goes, as the classic hymn says, this is my Father's world, and everything in my Father's world belongs to him. So he has ownership of it. And with ownership entails rights. The owner has the right to do with the things that he owns. And the owner also has the right to command stewards that he assigns under that ownership how certain things are to be taken care of. So it's there's a pragmatic utilitarian bend towards the idea that, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because God's going to make a new world anyway. Well, the same God who created the world and owns the world has charged us to steward it well.
That's right. And it's his responsibility. Like, if it's the end of it, it's up to him. It's not up to us, right? And so the other thing is the interaction with people. So your business is in society, and your society is in the environment. And so there's interactions between all three of those, right? And so a lot of the problems we're experiencing are because we haven't looked after the environment, right? And so, say like our work in Africa, people are deforesting, right? Which has, consequences for climate, for biodiversity, for soil erosion, for all kinds of things, right? And even their time to go further and further to get firewood. Well, why are you going further and further? Is to boil the water. If you just had safe water, then you'd have to cut down the tree. Now, yes, you could plant a tree, but why don't you just don't cut it down in the first place, right? And so another challenge I get into is we're very often on the different side of different topics, which in some sense is good, because then we have a voice in that. So just yesterday, I was in a call with somebody, a multinational company, and I was advocating for solar, not here in Canada, solar in Uganda, because there's twice as much daylight in Uganda. So our solar panels, people say you're an environmental consultant, where are your solar panels? Well, they're on the roof of the orphanage in South Sudan, Africa. Why? There's twice as much daylight because they don't have winter. So every panel puts out twice as much electricity. B, Ontario is 10% fossil fuel. They were 100% fossil fuel because they were just running a generator, which they shut off. So you have 20 times the environmental benefit from every panel. Then you can use that diesel money for food for the kids. So now you got a social benefit. So every dollar goes much further if you spend it there instead of ours here. And there's this really, really strong local bias on everything here. Like, all money should be spent on us, right? If there's carbon money, it should be spent on us here. If there's money for water aquifers, it should be here. We have more water than everybody else on the planet. There's a little bit more to go around. Let's take it, right? Versus, why don't we give safe water to somebody? So interesting, a nice development this year is the old spaghetti factory you might have eaten there in Toronto. And we did water and energy conservation for the restaurant, but then they sponsored 50 families. And we don't give these away. We do price discounts. So the family still pays the rest of it so that they have ownership and dignity and they look after it and that kind of thing. But with those 50 filters, they have these water jugs on the tables at the restaurant. And there's a tag on the collar that says every liter of water they provide in Toronto, they provide a liter of safe water through those 50 filters over in Africa, right? And so it doesn't have to be local. Same thing with these carbon. We have one atmosphere. It doesn't matter if you reduce it here or in Africa or anywhere else, right? And so so we can bring this perspective that's lacking. We primarily contribute the most carbon, right, in the developed worlds, and we get most of the money, and we get the least of the consequences. They have the opposite. The most consequences because they have no irrigation, they have no money to adapt, right? And why not? And the money goes much further if you do it there. So basically, we can advocate for other things. Even what should you do about it? I used to argue, if you don't agree with climate change, the things you would do to address it would be smart things to do anyway. The overall average of everything we've ever done is 1 year payback. So if you were to give me $1,000 and I give you $1,000 every year for the rest of your life, you would probably do that, whether it was environmental or not. I had to stop making that argument because we invented the only thing that doesn't have other benefits, and that's putting it down a well in Alberta and hoping it doesn't come out again. Carbon sequestration. The most stable form of carbon is coal. The only way for that to get in the air is if you were dumb enough to dig it up and burn it. So what do? We dig it up, we burn it to make electricity. Is the kind of one of the number one things we're using with coal in the States, right? And then we try and take that out of the air. Even if you're successful, it's 30 times more expensive than just making it with solar in the first place. Right. And so we're doing the least effective things we can do and so therefore we're having less beneficial impact than we can.
Bruce, do you think that where is the line between, in terms of effectiveness and impact, and marketing or presentation? Like, is there a draw to doing certain types of work because it draws attention, which may in turn draw finances or personnel or other benefits, even if the measured impact isn't what it should be? Is that a factor in your work?
Oh yeah,
it's like carbon offsetting. I've heard is like one of those things that it's all marketing, but very little carbon offsetting. Tokens are legit. Yep.
And so, what happens is there's interest in these things failing, and so. Say like even our own projects in Africa, we were going through the process of getting them set up to generate carbon offsets, right? You can plant a tree, you get an offset. How about you just don't cut down the tree, right? And so each of those water purifiers avoids 3 tons a year of carbon from burning trees. And so we're in the process, and we had to do the stakeholder engagement meeting and boiling the water and you got the water testing, whatnot. Midway through that process, there was an article in The Guardian that some credits in the Amazon jungle were bad. Immediately, the carbon company backed out and they would not certify. It's a different continent, different type of project, different location. But the end result is people are dying because they're not getting safe water, right? These water filters actually prevent people from dying, literally, right? And prevent them from getting sick. The average filter saves a family $1,000 over the 25 years, just on these people make less than $1 a day. You're going to save them $1,000 just by having a $100 water filter, right? And so the consequence on the ground is that it's just no justification to not do anything, right? We can't do everything, so let's do nothing, right? And this one looks bad, so they all look bad. So what we advocate is what we call a credible, affordable journey. And so decarbonization. And so I'll be presenting on this next week in London on that. But basically, we help Maple Leaf Foods. So Maple Leaf Foods is the world's first large food company to be carbon neutral. And it's not 2030, not 2050, 2019. And it didn't cost them money. So far, they report they've saved $17 million and they're carbon neutral. How did they do that? We went to 35 factories all over North America, modified every factory to use less water, less electricity, less gas, lose less protein as they're processing it. That reduced the problem, and then it generated the savings to pay for the rest of the journey with that money left over. And so what we advocate is this deep conservation first, because that's where the savings are. But the trouble is everybody else starts with the end instead. Let's start with solar panels or source your energy. So another big client for us right now is Unilever. So Unilever Nutrition wants to get to zero emissions by 2027. And so we did their mayonnaise plant in Toronto, the Hellmann's mayonnaise there. And our plan was so different than everything they've ever got that they said, okay, now you have to do the rest of the nutrition plans for us. Okay, now you have to do our Dove soap. Now your Axe, because nobody else is giving you a credible, affordable plan, right? The other plans are you spend this much money every year forever and buy your way out of this. Ours is let's cut the steam in half to 2/3 first. Then we're going to electrify. Then we're going to replace that electricity. And why use your roof? It's busy. Why don't we do it where the sun's shining, right? Let's make the electricity, right? And so a credible, affordable plan. And so that's kind of what we advocate for that last mile. So whatever that last mile is, you're going to be questioned on that, right? The carbon credits, the renewable energy credit, whatever it is, right? So pick something you feel comfortable defending. So there's another Christian organization called EAP that we're collaborating with on a project in Uganda. So they're building a run-of-river hydro and a 10 megawatt solar near our water project in Pakwach, Uganda. So we're going to provide everybody safe water in that community with the water filters, right? But if you partner with a specific project, then it's less likely that you get tarred with the same brush when some credit somewhere in the world looks bad. Hey, no, we're partnering with this project. We can go visit this project. We can, right? Our clients can see it. So what we say is whatever you're going to do, pick something you feel comfortable defending, right? And so that's why we advocate. That's why ours are on the solar panels on the roof of the orphanage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's like this theme that you keep coming back to about people. Like in your workplace, it's about the people. In your projects, it's about the people. Your customers, you're bringing them on, missions trips kind of thing with you. Like it seems you're an environmentalist within that category, but it's all about the people. And it's interesting too, like the global perspective, the local, like it feels like there's a lot of category redefinitions that are really important, that are really hard to grasp. Like I remember you saying once to me, do you remember what you learned in school about recycling? And I'm like, yeah, we were taught to recycle. But what was the tagline? Was it recycle, reduce, reuse or whatever? What was that tagline? The first was reduce. And I remember being like, oh yeah, like I guess it really is like if we just reduce, but it's like a mind-blowing concept that companies all over just don't know how to save money by, producing less or dealing with their waste. Like reduce what you create, make whatever. But it's like we just went through a crisis of like supply chain. So, supply chain, it's like, well, we do everything efficiently. We'll produce just as much, just in time so that there's no waste. But then all of a sudden you end up with all these global problems. Like, it just feels like there's a lot of complexity with this. And for the average Christian, it's like, well, I guess Bruce can do this stuff, but like, I don't know. Like what are the categories that Christians need to reconsider? Reduction rather than consumption is something maybe we should all be processing from our lunch today to other things. Like that's what I'm thinking about right now. But what are some other concepts that we should reconsider, especially as Christians?
No, that's great. And kind of what we find is whatever new buzzword comes up, we're already at the forefront of it. And then we're illustrated, hey, here's a company that's doing this and whatnot. And it's because we're all about this prevention angle. So prevention is 1,000 times better than curing. So, Ontario came out with a Toxic Reduction Act. Who's doing this, right? Well, here's some case studies, right? And so then, they used our case studies and had us teach people how to do this, but just because it's the smart thing to do. So on the toxic reduction, say we did a company in London and they distill solvents for the car industry. So you imagine paint solvents, right? For painting, they get it, they distill it and sell it back to the car companies. So instead of a paint can, you get a big tote, right? And so when we're doing our audit, there's a fan in the wall blowing air out the wall, right? And if we only did electricity, we would get them a better fan. Or we might get them a heat exchanger, get some of that heat back. Instead, we said, well, why do we have the fan? Well, it's not safe to breathe in here. With our meters, we found there's 3,000 ppm of volatile compounds coming from the still bottom tank. We sealed the tank, vented it through the condenser, condensed the solvent, sold the solvent. Now you don't need the wall fan. So you have to go deeper and deeper. And we always go back to, what job is the water solving for you? What job is the energy solving for you? Can we solve that? Yes, that made sense 100 years ago to flume these apples from here to here. Now water is kind of expensive. Why don't we use a conveyor and rinse them with a nozzle? You know what I mean? So you have to go back and rethink these processes from the beginning. And that's how we find these profound gains that other people can't find, I guess, or don't bother. But what you mentioned on the supply chain stuff, like food waste is another big one. So on the big numbers, 1/3 of all the food grown is wasted right now. 1/9 of people don't have enough food. So today we're already wasting 3 times more than it would take to feed everybody on the planet who doesn't have enough food without growing anything more. Leading cause of deforestation is converting land to agriculture. Why are we doing that? Because we're wasting the food we're growing, right? Almost 100% of the effort is on how do we destroy that food more efficiently? With a composter, a digester. There's no effort on why are we wasting that food in the first place. So we did 50 factories under a grant from Walmart Foundation. So 50 factories across Canada. We found an average of $230,000 per year of food that didn't was wasted with a 1-year payback. To give you an idea, if you put a grocery bag beside the CN Tower in London, you would get to London, Ontario before you ran out of grocery bags every year.
It's like a 2-3 hour drive.
And every company would save $350 for every ton of carbon they avoided. If food loss was a country, like growing food that we waste, it would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter on the planet after China and USA. It'd be the 2nd largest consumer of potable water on the planet is growing food that we waste. The largest is growing food that we eat. But, and so if you save that food, you save everything all the way back. So say we did a Campbell soup in Toronto, we found them 1,000 tons a year of food did not be wasted. Save them $700,000 a year. How much soup do you have to sell to make $700,000 profit? Right? And so it's just so impactful. So that's what we find is if you focus on the right areas, right, you're going to be, compelling, right? And a lot of it too is changing the way they look at it. So most people think it's cheap. My dumpster is my lowest bill in my factory, right? Is it? How much does it cost to buy what's in that dumpster? We did ice cream factory, $5 million per year of ice cream. $5 million, right? And, or even, one of the smaller ones at that Campbell's, it was 6 things. One of them was the meat. So they're doing product changeovers. Imagine you're making chunky soup, right? And at the end of the run, you run out of broth, right? And they were losing a bit of meat on the belts. So every time over the course of the year, it added up to 13 tons per year of meat being lost. They're sending it to a waste to energy plant, which they think, hey, that's great. We're making energy, right? 13 tons a year, $100 a ton. That's $1,300. Why are you wasting our time talking about a $1,300 problem? Well, because it costs you $10,000 a ton to buy the chicken plus $100 to destroy the chicken. For $131,000, can we redesign the system so we run out of broth at the same time we run out of meat? Right? And so the first thing you have to do is raise the priority level by actually assigning the true cost, because everybody's looking at their disposal cost, which is at least 10 times less than the actual cost to buy whatever it is in the first place, right? So again, prevention is the key for sure. And so whatever field it is, electricity, water, a negawatt hour is just not making it in the first place.
It reminds me of my days at my HR tech company where we would make the argument, well, you think the cost of turnover is the severance check, right? That's at the very end. Oh. But what's the cost of hiring? What's the cost of training? What's the cost of all the relationships? So
what's the cost of the lost productivity while you're looking for a replacement?
And your senior staff training them, right?
Yep.
So that's a real competitive advantage of ours, right? So I have 10 times lower turnover than a typical consultant. And, we've had like two of my best engineers were at a trade booth in a thing. Multinational engineering company. We'll give you both jobs for more than you're getting if you leave now. And they both said no. Now, it's not that they would make more money if they did that, right? That's not going to keep. It's this impact, this opportunity to have an impact, right? Both of them had actually been to Uganda with me, right? And so, people have a hierarchy of needs, whether they're Christians or not even, right? Self-actualization is at the top of, say, like Maslow's hierarchy or whatever. And so people have an inherent desire to make a difference, right? And if you can provide that for your staff, for your customers, for your, other people.
Yeah, it's like an example of getting deeper, like not only with the products, well, why are you creating this kind of product? Why are you disposing of this? Whatever. Let's work backwards and ask why. Keep asking why. Same with people. You say you want $10,000 more per year on your salary. Well, why? Like, why is that important to you? I've shared the story before of a coworker of mine who wanted a bigger raise than he got. And I just kept pushing him on the why question. And it was truly because he didn't feel valued. He didn't feel like he had like inherent worth to the company. And it was a demarcation of that. But if he was celebrated more, or was given more thanks for the extra work that he put on the last product, that sort of thing. Sorry, Austin, you were going to jump in.
Yeah,
there.
That's good.
Well, no, I was just going to jump in and not so much change the subject, but just redirect the conversation in a different direction. So in terms of you're walking through preventative processes in the big picture, the big scale, working with factories and some of the largest corporations in the world. How does that play out at the consumer level, at the individual family level? What changes and what stays the same, or what are some things that people overlook when thinking about this question?
Yeah. I may answer kind of a similar question, but not exactly the way you're doing it, just because we don't interact directly with customers that much. However, what your question reminds me of is kind of stakeholder engagement. So our tagline is engineering change, and engineering is the easy part. So if I want to do something in South Sudan or Uganda, I have to understand that culture, which is very different than Canadian culture. It's not right or wrong, but it's different. So the way you deal with time, authority structures, everything else, right? So you have to navigate that. But the same thing, every factory we work at is a different culture. We have to navigate that to get it done, right? And so, interestingly, by bringing my staff to Uganda and South Sudan, they learn how to navigate culture faster. And also, it builds trust. So in consulting, the commodity is actually trust. Do you trust me to change the way you've been making mayonnaise for the last 50 years, right?
Yeah.
Do you trust me to, right? The faster you can get to trust, the faster you can actually help somebody, right? And so it's kind of gets a virtuous circle that way, but that's what we'll do. So let's say we're going to change something in a factory. I might need 10 people to agree that we can change it, and we can change it in this way. And so what's the maintenance person's? Well, for you maintenance person, actually more work for you than now. It's one more piece of equipment you got to babysit and maintain and whatnot. However, you're protecting every job in this factory. There's 300 people who work here, right? If we can build more margin in this factory, then you're helping protect all your colleagues from this job moving to Georgia, right? Or, the sanitation guy. If we do this, then we have better quality control because we get this sensor. So whatever the pillar is that person's interested in, we have to pitch it from that way. And so an interesting example too is, what is it, in Breslau, Conestoga Meat Packers hired us, and we had done some water and energy for them before. And then they called us up and said, hey, we're going to start a green team. Can you teach them how to do a solid waste audit? I said, okay. Do you want me to literally teach your people how to sort garbage? Or why don't we do a solid waste prevention audit? So we did a solid waste prevention audit where we went back in the factory, not the dumpster. Where was it lost? What was it lost just before? What was it worth just before you lost it? So one of the things we found was 50 pork tenderloins per day were getting stuck in this one chilling machine. At the cleanup shift, he's sending it to the renderer, which is the right thing to do at that point in time. But why is it stuck in the machine? this is the most valuable product you're making in the whole factory, right? If we modify it like this, then it's not going to get in there. And so then when we rolled these out on the floor, we didn't tell the staff, this is how much you're going to save the company. You can run it like this. It's fine. It's safe. If you run it like this, 12 people can eat for a year, right? So what language applies to them? So say like Labatt's in London, we were doing some effluent, yield improvement work. Their effluent numbers are in what's called BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand, which glazes people's eyes over, right? It's just the amount of organic material. So instead we changed the dial so it actually reads cases of Budweiser beer. Yep. It would take this many cases to see what you're seeing in that effluent, right? It's the same number. It's just a different metric on it, right? And so when we do the food loss, food is amazing because we use 12 different metrics on that. It takes this many acres of agriculture output for what you're losing right here, right? It takes this much embedded water, this much embedded carbon, right? You could support this many jobs with the money. You could, right, feed this many people based on 750 calories per meal, right? And so it's very, very impactful and very, as far as paybacks, food is the fastest payback of anything we do. It's under 1 year, almost all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. And that business model, for those tracking and following along, Bruce's company will literally say, hey, Labatt, we will get paid only if we save you money. Like, just summarize that for you, because it's gone through some iterations over the last dozen years. But you've figured out this way of saying, well, we know we're going to save you money, so we will be paid off of your income.
No, so that's a great, and we can put in a link to your blog to kind of the article that B Corp wrote up on that evolution of that business model. But basically, the challenge is, when I set up Enviro-Stewards 24 years ago, I just used the model I'm familiar with, which is the model that other consultants use. The trouble is I prevent problems. And so I get less money by creating more value. Say we did a Tim Hortons factory, we eliminated a treatment plant altogether, right? That would have been $1 million, would have been $100,000 to design it. Now that's gone. Or Jackson Triggs in BC, we built them a treatment plant, but before we built it, we cut the water in half and we cut the wine loss by 2/3. They get to sell the wine. They don't have to buy the water, but the treatment system's half as big, same amount of work to design it. You get half as much money. So we're making less money.
Normally as a consultant, you're paid like 10% of what the build is.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, you're hired for the build. Oh, 10%. Let's make a bigger build. It's like, no,
exactly.
Like it's backwards.
Exactly. And you make more money if you do that. And so I had to come up with a different model. So then, okay, we're making all this value. What if we kept part of this value we're generating for the customers? So we tried that model, and actually it worked great for privately held companies. So say Southbrook Winery we cut their energy 40%, and the owner's more than happy to pay, right? Because he actually canceled a third of his solar panels. He was buying solar panels to replace his electricity, he canceled a third of them, which saved 2 rows of vineyard from getting covered with solar panels and brought the payback down to 2 months. Right. So he's very happy as a clam. But when you deal with a multinational or a publicly traded company, that's last year, right? Last quarter, we're on to other things. Right. And the next way to save money is to argue with you about how much to pay you. And so at that point, you don't want to be arguing about getting paid. You want to be talking about the next job. And so we made much more money that way, but we're on the wrong side of the table. We're on the opposite side of the table with our client now instead of the same side. Right. So instead we said, okay, what if we just guaranteed how much we would save? So whatever you pay us, we'll find that much per year that you think is practical and affordable. If not, you don't pay us. Let's say we find you half, then you pay us half that. If we find you 10 times, you still only pay us what that is. So the benefit is, what you're going to pay us before you start. Right. The other thing we started doing now is selling implementation with the assessment. Because the other problem is you find all this stuff and it might take 6 months, a year to implement stuff. And so, or to go through procurement. And so the challenge is too, conventional procurement has no idea how to handle good opportunities. They only know how to do bad ones. So literally, let's say it's a 5-year project. Then what can we do to skim this and we'll get it under, 3.5 years, we can get it approved. Let's say it's a 1-week payback. Okay, well, let's go through 6 months of procurement and let's do this and get 3 quotes and whatnot, right? And we've lost, 6 a week times how many, whatever it is, right? And so they've cut staff so much, there's nobody left to do it, right? And they've cut budget so much, there's no extra to do it. And so all this efficiency is laying around the factories, right? And so a lot of it is helping them, again, on your 10% thing you're talking about, Andrew. So one thing we found was a red hose that was using $70,000 a year of hot water going straight in the drain, right? Wow. Say, well, can we do this, right? And so, well, you got to get everybody to agree and whatnot, right? And so, and their procurement is, okay, you go do all the legwork, get everybody to agree, you can change it in this way and whatnot, and then we'll give you 10% of the capital. Okay, well, what's 10% of zero? Right? It's zero capital, right? So eventually we couldn't take it anymore anyway. So one of our problems is we're kind of helpful anyway, right? So after 2 years, we couldn't take it. We just did it on our own, got everybody to agree. Somebody said, yeah, this was broken 2 years ago. It was replaced, this pressure relief valve. We went over and literally shut it off, right? After $140,000, it went down the drain, literally. And so there's these embedded efficiencies kind of in the system, right? And so we have to help them work around their own systems, right? How do we do this? And so one of the ways we do it is just put an arbitrary number, 10,000, 20, 30, whatever you want towards implementation. So we're not going to stop. As soon as we find the thing, if you guys agree with it, we're going to implement it right away. Right?
Yeah.
And when we get to that limit, whatever it is, hey, we're getting the limit. So far, we're saving this much per year. Do you want us to stop or keep going? So it gets past that hurdle, right? Instead of you got to package it in this big project with, whatever. So we're trying to get around the systems that way to help them, right?
Right.
Very cool. Very cool. We're running out of time, but I don't know, Austin. I want to put this question. It's too big of a question to answer in less than a couple of minutes. But what's your opinion on mission trips? There's this church culture sometimes of short-term missions trips, fly in, build a well, come back home. We've talked before about the book When Helping Hurts, and it's a good book to talk about this problem of sustainability. How should churches think about missions trips?
No, that's a great question. And we have that TED Talk if you want to. We can put in the link to where it goes into bigger details of that. But a good example is right now a foundation has given us a grant for some of these discounts. And their only requirement was they had to have a volunteer opportunity for their staff. I said, okay, that's great. However, I want none of your staff to build a biofilter, because the local team can build it better than your staff who've never built one. And they already know how to do it. Why would they stand and watch you do it? Instead, send me your accountant, send me your salesperson, send me your visionary, and let's work with the teams there on building capacity for bookkeeping, for accountability, for this, So in the mission trips, we think what you should do is take everything you've ever learned and put aside and don't do it. And go do something you've never done, while the local person can't do it because they can't compete with a free one. Right? It's actually illegal in Canada to do it that way. Right? It's called an unfair business practice. I can't give away my engineering for free because I'm creating a monopoly, so I can charge whatever I want. But that's how we do 100% of our aid. And so that's why I bother with the TED Talk is half the problem isn't in Africa. It's here. And it's in the heads of us. Every commercial you've ever seen is relief-based help, which creates damage. It's not even neutral. You're not even wasting your money. You're actually creating damage. You're destroying whatever capacity was there. If you did it differently, you would explode that local capacity, right? And so we have to rethink the way we're doing. And if you think about it for 5 minutes, you're going to never think about it the same way again. But just the way we've been conditioned is kind of this relief-based model. And
we're the hero. Let us be the hero to you. We are the Superman. Exactly. We'll come in. We'll pick you up. You are helpless. It's so unfortunate.
And so, as Christians, we should be the first people to have the opposite. We can come in as your servant, right? How are we going to help you, Matthew, expand your project over here, right? Versus your equal, versus your superior. And so even the traditional charitable model is a slave-based model, according to our people in Africa. Is if you're going to eat, you need to do this, right? And if we can't raise the money, then you're not going to eat, right? And so and we're going to make all the decisions over here. And so it's a pretty strong word, but that's the word that they use, right? You're no longer a slave to the donor when you can provide for yourself.
Right.
That's good. Well, Bruce, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for your work in the world. I appreciate it. I appreciate the conviction you've given me about what I'm going to eat for lunch and how much I'm going to throw out. I have started cooking after I cook a chicken. I'm like, I got to make some broth out of this. I'm trying to do the little things, but yeah, for anybody who's listening, whatever organization you work at, there's all sorts of opportunities you might be interested in to reach out to Enviro-Stewards and have them come in and give you a quote of how your business can save a bunch of money. I tried to convince the University of Waterloo when I was working there. Bruce and I were chatting about this, and it's like, they have so much waste in the dorms and the food and all this kind of stuff. But alas, that I didn't have enough influence at the time.
That comes to another procurement problem of the cheapest audit. It's actually the most expensive because it doesn't find you the savings. Because the cheapest one, if you find savings, you have to write up those, right? If you don't find it, you don't have to write it up.
Yeah. The University of Waterloo once created an efficiency committee, literally created an efficiency committee, and it found there is no inefficiencies to get rid of. Anyways, these it's just so laughable, but that literally happened. Anyways, thank you for listening to all of our listeners. This has been a great conversation. We will put links in the show notes so that you can listen to that TED Talk, read that article, whatever the next step is for you. But thank you for supporting us, for those of you on Patreon who support the show. And thank you, everybody, for listening once again. Use tech, find rest, glorify God. Take care.
Thank you.